Hello again, feral friends and fellow nature nerds. Thank you for tuning in to Dirt Dispatch number 27. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara. Well, spring continues apace here in Wyoming, and by that I mean that we're starting to see buds on some of the trees. And this past Wednesday, temperatures were up near 70, and I even got a little sunburned when I spent a couple hours mountain biking at my happy place, Kurt Gowdy State Park. And then on Friday, it was in the low 30s and it snowed. Now, I think I've mentioned before that spring and fall around here come with a wide variation in the weather. There's a lot of times that we're in shorts and t-shirts one day and also under a winter storm warning for the next day. But while I was out at the state park, I spotted several types of wildflowers blooming. First were bunches of small white-petaled flowers with yellow centers. These I identified as Hooker's Townsend daisies, named for a 19th century botanist, William Jackson Hooker. They're also known as Easter daisies, and I'm guessing that's because they bloom around this time of year, and of course we just passed Easter, so I guess they're right on schedule. They're primarily found along the Rocky Mountain corridor, growing in well-drained talus and gravel slopes, and that checks out because Kurt Gowdy has a high concentration of granite in various stages of weathering. In other words, lots of gravel. The second flower I spotted was the prairie pasque flower. These pale lavender flowers grow on top of a fuzzy stalk and generally have 5 to 8 petals. And interestingly, they develop their flowers before their leaves, so they bloom when their leaves are still just beginning to emerge. The third species of wildflower I spotted were sagebrush buttercups. These small 5-petaled flowers are, as you might expect from a buttercup, bright yellow. Now, they don't stand out too much because they're so small and low growing, but if you're paying attention, they'll definitely catch your eye. They're known to be early bloomers, sometimes as early as February, and might even poke up through the snow. But they're reportedly toxic to human and livestock, so don't eat them. I know you were thinking about it. Lastly, I spotted blooming mountain ball cacti, which in my opinion were the most striking. These cacti are roughly the size and shape of a tennis ball, at least the ones I saw. They can get a little bit bigger. But on the top, they sport several multi-petaled dark pink flowers with a multitude of bright yellow stamen in the middle. They really stood out in what was otherwise a sea of mostly light browns with a hint of green. Now, I had one other sighting of interest this week, and that was a mink. Unfortunately, it was a road-killed mink, but it was still a mink. It's actually the second road-killed mink I've seen in almost exactly the same spot. The first one was about a year ago, and I can only hope that these weren't the only two in the area. Now, I'm not going to go into much detail about mink because I think I'll feature them in a future episode of the Dispatches from the Forest podcast, but I will tell you that they're mustelids, members of the weasel family. You may recall, since I've talked about them on other episodes, that badgers, skunks, otters, and wolverines are also members of the weasel family. Mink tend to live near water, like lakes, rivers, and marshes, and this one was not far from the small lake here near Dispatch's HQ. They rarely stray far from the water's edge, but one of their favorite prey is rabbits, so it may have left the relative safety of the lakeshore and crossed the road in pursuit of a rabbit, which are also plentiful in that area. Mink are beautiful. Their fur is incredibly soft, lustrous, and a deep, rich brown color. It's easy to see why people have prized them for their fur. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to collect it at the time, and when I went back for it the next morning, it was gone. I had hoped that the cold snap we were having would preserve it and maybe keep it safe, but it was probably a free, relatively fresh meal for a coyote or a bird of prey or some other scavenger. I mean, I'm not mad, scavenger's gonna scavenge, but just a little disappointed to miss out on the chance to add something that unusual to my educational biofacts. Ah well. If you want to support the podcast, though, you can do that by sending me a mink. No, I'm just kidding. But do consider becoming a patron. Check out all the details at patreon.com/dispatchesfromtheforest. You can also donate using the Cash App and the hashtag ForestNerd, or via PayPal using my email address. dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com. Speaking of my email address, you can use that to, send me an email if you feel so inclined. I'm always open to suggestions, questions, and comments. Check out the merch store at cafepress.com/shop/dispatchesfromtheforest. Click on products and get yourself some sweet merch. Finally, you can follow Dispatches from the Forest on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. Dirt Dispatches is a production of Dispatches from the Forest and may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.